Samuel D. Hunter is an American playwright whose writing has earned him multiple important awards and widespread acclaim for his ability to illuminate the tenderness and complexity of ordinary lives. His first Broadway production, Little Bear Ridge Road, marks a major milestone in a career defined by authenticity, compassion, and masterful storytelling. Please welcome Samuel D. Hunter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Samuel, you are one of America's greatest contemporary playwrights and becoming globally famous after your play, The Whale, was adapted to a major motion picture and Brendan Fraser winning the Oscar for Best Actor. Before we dive into The Whale and your fabulous debut on Broadway, please tell our global audience that may not be familiar with all your work, what kind of stories you write and why you think people relate so much to them.
Yes, so thank you. I grew up in a very isolated part of the United States. It's kind of the corner sort of inland of Seattle, which is a very, very sparsely populated part of the country. And I think all of my plays are set in that part of the country, and I've been constantly very interested in writing stories about isolation and people who are living on the margins of America. And so I think that's been my project for many, many years now. And certainly The Whale falls into that category. This man who's been, eating as a form of depression for most of his life. And certainly that's true of Little Bear Ridge Road on Broadway right now, that it sees people living on the margins of society. So, but though the plays are very American in that way, I think the themes are very universal. The themes are about finding hope amidst darkness. They're about human connection. They're about the redeeming value of empathy and humanity. So I don't think, even though the plays are very specifically American, I think the themes are quite universal.
hmm I agree from what I see. And what do you think? Why do you think out of your body of work, The Whale was the one picked up to become a movie?
It's a very interesting question, and it's a question I've asked many times. I mean, the simple answer is that the director, Darren Aronofsky, just happened to see the play, and he's one of the few people on Earth who can just sort of materialize a movie out of nothing. He has such a track record of interesting, thought-provoking, challenging work. Um, but I don't know. I think there was something about the play. It was the first play of mine that really struck a chord with audiences here in New York. It was at a relatively small theater, 125 seats
hmm
off Broadway, but it really punched above its weight, if I can use that phrase. I think people were challenged by it and were surprised by it. I don't think people had really ever encountered a character quite like that. And I think that the audience is so many people, when the lights come up and they see this man who is very far from their lived experience for the most part, but then over the course of an hour, 45 minutes, they come to deeply fall in love with this man, as complicated as he is. I think that was a cathartic experience for people. And so I think it just I was surprised by how how much it struck people, and I'm continuing to be surprised as the movie, moved across the world, and now as all these international productions of The Whale are cropping up over the globe, I continue to be really gratified and surprised at the sort of universality of this very, very specific story.
And I'm so glad that this director allowed you to be so present at the production because it's so common. We all live in New York, or when you go to LA and you you are in this industry and you see that you sell the rights for a production, and sometimes you get there and the film has nothing to do with the book you wrote or the play you wrote. I'm sure as a writer you had this experience. I work at an American agency as well, literary agency,
Oh.
and this can be a terrible disappointment. So I'm so glad that according to something I read about this in the occasion, you were very happy that he basically did it word to what you write, right? You wrote, right?
Yes, it was an incredible gift, both that Darren shot the script word for word, but also that he invited me to be on set and work with Brendan and the other actors. I, I really couldn't have asked for anything more. It's I think probably a once in a lifetime experience because to your point, in America as a playwright, I own all of my work and I control all of my work. But as
Hmm.
a screenwriter, that I sell my work. And to your point, then a director or an actor or a producer can do whatever they want with it. So the fact that they remained so true to the character and the story and the script I had written, it's a real testament to Darren's faith in me.
Yes, yes. Well deserved, by the way. And The Whale was also performed as a play, as you said, in multiple countries. You and I met at the opening reel with
That's
actor
right.
José de Abreu, which was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And I'd like to ask you, as a writer, do you think something in Charlie's character changed, even if it's slightly, when played by actors from different cultures?
I think it does, but in ways that I'm always, this I have to admit, even though the whale has been performed now in dozens of other countries and dozens of other languages, coming to Rio was the first time that I actually got to see an international production of the whale, a non-English language production of the whale. And
Oh, nice.
I think there are nuances and changes, but you see those nuances and changes even when you see another English language production.
Oh.
Like
Mhm.
different actors, different directors, different designers, they bring so much to something that I'm not even sure if even it was all that different than different English language productions that I've seen. But it is always so gratifying to see the audiences go on the ride of the play in the same way, even if it's in a different language. Because I think speaking to what I said before, I think the emotional language of the play is universal. It transcends English or Portuguese or Greek or Mandarin or however, many languages the play has been translated into. I think there's something just at the core of it, which is like deeply human and deeply universal.
Without a doubt. And once you said that Brandon Fraser had the pulse of the character, so I'm so
Mm.
glad that he was the one immortalizing Charlie on screen. How was being at the Academy Awards ceremony and seeing him win an Oscar playing your character?
It was so overwhelming. It really felt like because I had never been on an awards campaign for a movie before, so it was all very new to me. And it's so much more than just the Oscars. I spent starting with Venice in August and then going all the way through the fall and spring to the Oscars. I was constantly traveling. I was with Brendan, sometimes I was with Darren, sometimes I was with everybody, sometimes I was alone. And so you make so many stops from Venice to Toronto to Los Angeles to Chicago to Austin to and so it's a very dizzying experience, but it all culminates in the Oscars. And so, I think by that time I was so uh
Used to it.
overwhelmed and exhausted and used to it maybe that I was like, whatever happens, this has been amazing. This has been a once in a lifetime thing. But honestly, like when they said his name, it's a moment I'm never gonna
Oh, I
forget.
can only imagine.
Yeah.
And he made such a moving speech about it, calling you, right, lighthouse. It's not something you forget, right?
Never. I'm never going to forget that. And I'm so glad that it's on YouTube because it's a moment now I can always like harken back to in darker moments and yeah, and remember that and that incredible time, that incredible night.
Some things are so big that if you don't have it on tape, you don't even it's so many emotions when it happens. I'm
That's
glad
right.
about it too. Awesome.
Yeah.
So congratulations. That was so powerful. And let's going back to the present now. And
Yeah.
before we get to Broadway, I'd like to ask back a little bit to your body of work. Your stories take place in Idaho, as you said, where you're from, but you once said also that you do it so they can become like chapters in a book, almost like talking to each other. I thought that was so interesting. Would you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think coming up as a writer, when I was a student and getting to know all the playwrights, that I really loved, I think my favorite writers were ones where you could, even if their name was not on the script, you could immediately identify who wrote that play.
Mm.
And because it felt like the project was bigger than any one play, and it wasn't about, trying to outdo yourself every single time, you know what I mean? It was more about establishing this larger body of work that felt rich and luminous and um kind of ongoing, and I mean all of the writers that I loved coming out, all the way going back to Shakespeare. I mean, they all feel they're huge and all encompassing, but they all feel of the same voice. And I think increasingly, in 2025, as you know, as we see the rise of AI and like all of these different like storytelling becoming so dispersed, you know what I mean, and the ways we tell stories becoming so wide ranging, that I think I my hope is that the public will crave things like those authors that they love that can't be simulated by AI. They can be imitated maybe, but not embodied by AI. So I think that continues to be the project for me, and I haven't grown tired of it yet. So we'll see.
Hope you never will. It's working very
Yeah.
well. And great point what you said about AI. It's really a way to mark your territory somehow,
That's
and
right.
people know what's going on. And getting to know your body of work better, I am extremely impressed not only by the depth and relatability of your stories across cultures, even, but by your terrific dialogues. Oh
Oh,
man.
thank you.
You can set a play at an apartment like The Whale or a cubicle, as you have done, with
Yes.
no bells and whistles, and there is not one dull moment. I saw that sitting now on Broadway at your new play. You're really a master of expressing all these real life situations in moving, interesting ways, often presenting something that I found was fun, that was laughter and tragedy, almost side by
That's right.
side.
That's
And
right.
when well done, I mean, I looked around and audience love it. So I would like to ask you, since you've been doing this for a while and you said you're very
Mm.
specific, what led you to this perfect formula? Let's call it this way.
I think it's the advice I give to any young writer is you need to write 10 full-length plays, and maybe your 11th one you'll start to figure something out about who
Mhm.
you are as a writer. I just slowly had to figure out what is the language of playwriting for me, and it might be completely different from plays that I love, completely different from plays that I've studied or that I cherish, but what is the language that I have? And I think very slowly, to your point, I realize that the language that I love is where humor and tragedy live side by side to one another, where like one moment can be a belly laugh and the next moment can be a gut punch. And I think I also realized that I loved the kind of dialogue that sounds deeply, deeply human. And so when I write dialogue, I write in a lot of pauses and silences and unfinished sentences. In my plays, characters don't freely articulate themselves in dense paragraphs. They struggle to articulate, like communication is difficult for the people in my plays because I feel like that's what I see in real life. And though I will say, the plays are crafted within an inch of their life, because I'm very, Joe Mantello, who directed Little Bear Ridge Road, is one of my favorite kind of director, because he can go to me and say, Sam, I think there's half a sentence too much in this paragraph. And he'll be right, because like he's just an expert at keeping wind in the sails of the play the entire time. And so, but even though they do have that level uh, precision, through multiple drafts, it is always deeply important for me that they sound like real human beings reacting in real time. And hopefully that's what keeps the plays engaging, is that they don't feel artificial.
Yes, yes. And there are so many plays and even films that are, there is so much going on, and people, yeah, you see the effects, you see the monologues, but it's not like it happens in real life. So, especially when it comes to drama, I think the way you present it, it really touches you because you see, you recall conversations you had with real people that when the conversation is very tough, the emotions are very strong, they struggle to communicate. Even people who are
That's
very
right.
well spoken, they lose their words. So you depict it very well in your dialogues. Congratulations again. So now
Thank
let's
you.
talk about your debut on Broadway, Little
Yeah.
Bear Ridge Road. I watched it, I laughed and cried, and I looked around and everybody was doing the same. So, but most importantly, Samuel, and I want our global audiences, and especially people around that can actually go there,
Mm.
you don't live this play like you watch the musical. It was fun. It is very fun, but you take something home with you. I think that is a great differentiator. And I left the theater thinking, who I will share this with? Who
Mm.
am I going to recommend this play to? And that's why I invited you here, so I can do it in greater scale. So I will take the opportunity to say I want to ask really everybody in the tri-state area here to really go see this play because
Thank you.
you thank me later. It's really very very special. Now I would like to ask you, Samuel, to in a nutshell, so I don't spoil anything, to tell people what the story is about.
Yeah, so the story is a at its core a quiet human story about an aunt and a nephew who are reconnecting at the top of the pandemic, even though the play is not about the pandemic. It's set during the course of the pandemic. And it's basically about uh the aunt's brother, his father, who was a very complicated addict who recently passed away, and his son Ethan is here in town to settle his estate, such as it is. And very quickly, it becomes clear that Ethan has very little means. He's been sleeping in his car. And so, much to Sarah's chagrin, she offers him a place to stay in her house, which is on Little Bear Ridge Road, which is a good 30 minutes drive from any kind of civilization. And the majority of the play is set there. And really, the play asks the question, how can we save each other? Is saving each other even possible in 2025? The two characters are the last of their family line. They are the last people who have this last name, this very curious last name, Fernsby, and their family had been in this part of Idaho since, covered wagon times, since, the mid 1800s, and they are the last of their line. And the question of the play is sort of like, how do we find a path forward, which hopefully is the universal question that I think a lot of us are feeling in 2025, which is like, how do we find a path forward in these deeply complicated times? It is a drama, but it is there's a lot of healthy comedy in it. I wrote it specifically for Laurie Metcalf, who
Oh,
is a deeply funny actress. She's most well known for playing the sister Jackie on the sitcom Roseanne that ran here for years and years and years. And she is just one of the greatest actors of our generation, and it was a privilege of a lifetime to be able to write something for her.
fantastic. So you actually wrote it for her, right?
That's right. Yeah. So Lori was a founding member of the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, which is one of the most highly respected theater companies here in the United States. They are now 50 years old. Lori was involved with them when she was just a kid, and she hadn't been on the Steppenwolf stage for 14 years, and her very close collaborator Joe Mantello, the director, who is very famous for directing the musical Wicked, They decided, okay, let's do a play at Steppenwolf. It's their seventh collaboration together. They're very old friends. And instead of doing an established play, let's find someone to write us a new play. So they approached me. I had never met either of them, but Laurie was one of my favorite actors on earth. So I very quickly said, absolutely yes. The turnaround time had to be very quick. I had to give them a draft within 4 months, 5 months, or something like that. I was very nervous the entire time because the play was announced by Steppenwolf before there was a title or a script.
Oh gosh.
Yes, it was a lot of pressure. But then we did a week-long workshop in Chicago together, and I think we all fell in love with each other and we all fell in love with the play.
Oh.
And it was just and the following June, we went into rehearsals, and it was just a rare, one of those rare processes where just it felt like everybody was on the same page, telling the same story. So it was a dream and continues to be a
Oh,
dream.
so happy to hear. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We can tell it was like it's such a wonderful play. It's good to know that it was easy to get there, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Uncharacteristically.
absolutely. Talking about settings, you say that your plays normally are, it's so much more about the story and dialogues. Even when we talk about cross-cultural, sometimes
Mm.
you have to make some adaptations in settings to adjust to the local culture. And with your plays, you don't have this problem. Everybody understands it's an apartment and everybody's on the same page, whatever country or city you are. So I noticed with that in mind, when I went to watch the play, I noticed it's basically one two seat couch, right? The
That's right.
setting, which is amazing. So I was observing that. And as we said before, it's simple, but it's the couch, two people watching TV. But I noticed that Sarah and Ethan, they're very close up emotionally and to each
That's right.
other. So as they're not really just sitting there watching TV, they're using TV as kind of a vehicle to have some tough conversations that are beyond their normal limitations to have face to face, right?
Yes.
So I noticed something that I found very clever of you. It seems like this tool of talking through the TV, we're both staring at the TV and talking about something we cannot look at each
Yeah.
other. That was brilliant. But also something very funny as they start turning the couch to change scenes and time passing. Something happened that I don't know. I found it, I caught people laughing at this too. It was very fun. The couch that starts very simple later it starts changing. It reclines,
Yeah.
it has a place to put the drinks. So that was also brilliant because the play makes reference, without spoilers, but in some parts about stars and
Mm.
astronomy. So it's almost like the couch becomes that little spaceship that takes them to
Exactly.
places and to conversations they would never have. So am I going too crazy here, or that was
No, no, you are spot on. I mean, the
that
amazing
was so
thing, and
fun.
this is a credit to our amazing set designer Scott Pask, is that the only thing that I said in the play in terms of setting was a couch and a void. That's
Mm,
all that I said. Oh, and I did write that the couch could revolve.
okay.
But that is all that I gave him. And Scott took that simplicity and he found, to your point, the perfect couch. Like that couch can do things that I've never seen a couch can do with the reclining and the massaging and the lights and the
Yeah,
cup
this is so
holders. And I
fun.
mean, it's
Yeah.
like, and he made that, the set is this disc of a white carpet. So it almost feels like you're on this lunar landscape, and then at strategic moments, he illuminates this back wall that is this beautiful kind of distressed wood. And it makes the play feel exactly what it wants to be, which is that it's this tiny specific story, but it's happening in the vastness of the universe. So it's really truly one of the best designs I've ever had, but it's just like its genius is its simplicity and its
Exactly.
elegance.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Samuel Hunter has a guest page on our website. Please check it out and to find out more about his work and the link to buy tickets to Little Bear Bridge Road. You really cannot miss it. So Samuel, please tell us about the cast. You just talked about Laurie and the director and all, Joe. Is that true that when you wrote this to her, it was like it's your first play on Broadway. What kind of surprises did you have bringing Little Bear to this specific stage after so many previous productions?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, this is my, 13th or 14th play in New York City. They've all been off Broadway. Funnily enough, I thought, oh, is this going to be intensely different? Is this going to feel wildly strange to me? But I've been most surprised how it really just feels I could be making this play in a 99 seat theater, really. I mean,
Oh,
there's
marvelous.
just something about it that like, and I'm so glad that I didn't have to compromise the kinds of plays that I want to write to fill the booth, the booth theater, which is, I should say, my favorite Broadway house. It's so wonderful. It's about 800 seats, but it feels so intimate. It feels like you're in somebody's gigantic living room, which is just perfect for this play. But there are some like fun things about Broadway that I've never experienced before. There's like the stage door, with Laurie signing autographs and things like that. But mostly it just feels like making the play that I want to make in the same way that, I made a new play off Broadway in a 200 seat theater last spring. And I had the same level of kind of love and affection and investment, as I do this play. But it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun being on Broadway. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to go actually for curtain call tonight because I have a friend coming. So after I'm done here, I'm going to hop on the subway and go down. And then yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's marvelous. And that was even one of the questions that we received from our audience previously, because
Mm,
Broadway brings a lot of expectations and new audiences. And your body of work has been very consistent to keeping, to stay true to your style, your themes.
yeah,
And somebody asked, how do you resist temptation and sometimes this external noise that brings, oh, you have to change if you want to do something different. And you got to Broadway doing things exactly your way. So if you got to this, I don't believe you have to absolutely change anything, right? So
no, I don't think so. I mean, it did, it did take 13 plays to get to get to Broadway. So,
but
but
it
I
came
would rather do
intact,
it that
right, Samuel?
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I'd rather write the 13 plays and then get to the 14th on Broadway without having to compromise or feel like I need to make the plays louder or flashier or anything other than the kind of play that I want to make. So I do feel a little vindicated in that sense, I guess.
This is amazing. And we have some writers that also watch our show because of the film
Mm,
festivals and all. So you see, guys, sometimes if you keep changing to please an agent, to please somebody else, you're never going to find your true voice. So here you have a very successful example that consistency, right, Samuel? Do
that's
your
right.
13, 14, 23, keep going. And at some point, somebody, it's not luck, somebody's going to find that thing that you do well and consistently. They're going to see the value on it and find the audience to this. So sometimes
That's
when you
right.
want to do it too fast, you can even, correct me if I'm wrong, Samuel, but you can jump to change and not even have all the payback you want. You may get one success, one hit, and then because you have no identity, you're completely forgotten.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've said this to I haven't taught in a while, but back when I used to teach, I used to tell my students be very wary of the lightning strike of one of your first plays being a huge success because that usually doesn't lead to a sustainable career. A sustainable career is when you are slowly building an audience that wants to follow you. Whether it be in a 99 seat theater in the East Village or the booth theater on Broadway, they are invested in the kind of stories that you tell. But if you're only writing that one play to get that one hit, to get that one thing, it's not a sustainable career. It will serve you in the moment, but if you want a career as a playwright, at least in this country, I think it's about being consistent and building your audience play by play.
One thing that Brazilians, I think they will identify a lot with your stories in particular is as well something you mentioned in the past in one of your interviews that some movies nowadays and even some plays they they are written as if money were not real. Everybody's rich, everything's easy, everybody lives in a townhouse. So
That's right.
Brazilians, especially people who are living here or working abroad, our money back in Brazil is like 1/5 of a dollar. You were there
Yes.
recently. So seeing something that's realistic and also talk about not only middle class people, but people who are really struggling with $100 to spend a week or more, and they don't have money for the gas to get in a car and go to the next city 30 minutes away. It's very touching and very like takes you out of all the other stories that you see on social media and say, yeah, there are still real people out there. So thank you for bringing that to us. So finally, I'm sure that our audience around here will watch your play. I'll be on them for that. So
Thank you.
Samuel, if you had to live, if people who are going to watch Little Bear had to live the play with one lesson, what would you like it to be?
What I hope, I hope that it is a sense of hope, but I think it's hope that is very hard won. Do you know what I mean? I think I think false hope is easy and cynicism is also very easy, but I think in all of my plays and in my life, especially now that my husband and I are parents, we have an 8-year-old daughter. I
Oh.
have to have a sense of hard-won hope. I have to have a sense that like there is going to be a 2026 and 2027 and a 2028 because my daughter, who is 8, is likely going to see the year 2100. And so I don't have the luxury of being cynical. But at the same time, I think hope is really difficult. And I think the hope in this play is very difficult as well. And hopefully that is what the audience takes away from it.
Samuel D. Hunter, what a marvelous interview. It was a pleasure to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.